This video will teach you everything you need to go from the beginner's method to mastering the cross. This guide has 3 parts. First, how to pick good moves, which is your solutions. Second, how to execute those moves well, which is your finger tricks. And third, how to practice so that you actually learn how to use this in solves. I'm not going to cover anything advanced in this guide, like how solving cross influences later steps of the solve. And this isn't just a 10 simple tips video, it's kind of complicated and the long, not clickbait version of how to master the cross. The ultimate goal is to be able to solve your cross in 8 moves or less without re-gripping the cube every single solve. A regrip is a rotation or a change of hand position, and we get the number 8 moves or less because of this really good study that was done by Lars Vandenberg a few years ago. He ran a whole bunch of simulations and figured out that if you're going to solve cross on one color, like say you only solve cross on white, no matter what, you will be able to solve your cross in 8 moves or less. The thing is, less than 1/10 of 1% of scrambles require you to use 8 moves to solve your cross. Almost always, 99.95% of the time, you'll be able to solve your cross in 7 moves or less. So the benchmark that I give myself is to solve my cross in 7 moves or less every single time I solve. On average, you should be able to solve your cross in 5.81 moves. And if you're dual color neutral, meaning you use both white and yellow, you should be able to solve your cross in 6 moves or less, almost every single solve. I'll link this website in the description if you want to see all the numbers. And real quick, before we jump into the meat of this guide, I'm sponsored by thecubicle.com. If you need to buy any new speed cubes for yourself, they're by far the best cube store to buy from. They love and support the community and have a phenomenal selection. Use code TRUE at checkout for 5% off. Always solve the cross on the bottom. When you first learn to solve the puzzle, you almost certainly move pieces along the bottom and then move them into the top layer, and then you flip the whole cube over and then solve the rest of it. In order to get faster, you want to avoid having to flip the whole cube over before you move into the rest of the solve. So for the rest of this video, and hopefully the rest of your cubing career, what you're going to do is solve the cross from the bottom of the cube as soon as you start the solve. Good and bad pieces. There are 3 different sorts of cross pieces you will have to solve. The first kind is a good piece. It looks like this, and it's 1 move away from getting solved. They can be in a few different positions, so this is a good piece because I can solve it like that. This is a good piece because I can solve it in 1 move like that. There are some pieces that are 1 move away from becoming good, so this piece right here belongs right over here. It's 1 move away from being a good piece. It takes 2 moves to solve. I call those okay pieces because they're not perfect, but they're not horrible. The last type of piece is like this. These are bad. They take at least 3 moves to solve. To solve this piece, I would have to go 1, 2, solve it, and now this piece over here still isn't solved, and I have to fix it with a 3rd move. View the cross as 1 step, not 4 small ones. When you first learn to solve the cross with the beginner's method, what you're probably doing is picking an edge, solving it, picking another edge, solving it, and repeating that for all 4 of the edges until the whole cross is solved. In order to get really fast at the cross, you can't think about it as 4 individual steps. You have to think about it as 1 large step where all the moves are interconnected. Use each turn to set up the next ones. If you're not thinking about the cross as individual edges, you can do some really cool things where each move has 2nd and 3rd order consequences. So for example, in this scramble, 2 of the cross edges are already solved, and the only ones we have to figure out still are white-green and white-orange. What sometimes people would do is solve the white-orange one first, then solve the white-green one. But if we solve white-green first, it will move this edge over to here. Then we can solve this in 1 move. By using the white-green edge, we can turn this really bad white-orange edge into a good one. There are tons of opportunities like this in solving to use 1 turn to set up the next one. This is a much worse example. The red and blue edges are already solved, and both of these edges are pretty nasty. Solving this orange one would require moving it over and then putting it in down here. Same thing for the green one. But if we're smart about it, We can start by getting this orange edge ready to insert, then take this white-green edge and move it on top of this white-orange edge, so that when we solve this, this edge is now ready to go in. This principle of using one turn to set up the next is the foundation of doing cross well. The difference between a beginner cross solver and a very, very good one is planning the entire cross as a holistic step and using little tricks like this to their advantage. Move the cross instead of the pieces. When you first learn to solve the cross, you're taught to take every single piece, move it into the top layer, then solve it into the cross. In this example, there's a much better way to tackle this. 3 of the cross edges are already solved, and our only unsolved one is green-white right here. It looks kind of tricky to get into this location, but there's a really cool thing we can do. Instead of moving this piece, we can move the entire cross so that this spot right here moves underneath this edge. Put this edge right here, then solve the rest of the cross back to where it started. Instead of trying to figure out how we can move this piece up and around and down, just move the cross, insert the piece, then fix the cross. You can take this same principle of moving the cross instead of the pieces much, much further. In this example, red, white, and green-white are already solved, and we have to deal with the orange edge and the blue edge. We could try and move this edge into the top or move this edge into the top and solve those, but there's a better way to do this. First, move the cross a little bit and put orange into the bottom. Then move the cross a little bit more, put blue into the bottom, and solve the whole cross. The reason this works is because of the next principle. Don't worry if you don't understand this yet. Solve relatively. Let me try to explain what I just did in the previous example. No matter what happens, every time you solve a Rubik's Cube, the colors will always end up in the same positions. White will be on the bottom, yellow will be on the top, green and blue will never be next to each other, they'll always be opposite each other, and red and orange will never be next to each other, they will always be opposite each other. It does not matter how you scramble or how you solve, this is where things will always end up. When we're solving cross pieces, normally it's easiest to go, this orange edge needs to go next to this orange center, and solve it into this section right here, between the orange center and the white center. The thing is, if we can magically get the whole cross solved, but one turn away from all the pieces matching up on the side, that's just about as good as directly solving the edges into their final spots between these two center pieces. If we can solve the edge pieces of the cross relative to each other, orange is next to blue and orange is next to green, and so on, green is between red and orange, all the way around. Once we finish solving the cross, we can just move it back into its final position. Let's go through a whole example and I'll try to show this in a little bit more detail. This is how that example I did under the 5th tip worked. Here we have the blue edge and the orange edge unsolved, and the green-red edges are in the bottom layer but not solved yet. What we could do is move these 2 edges over, and now the whole cross is done for these 2 pieces, and we only have to figure out these 2. But now these 2 pieces are kind of tricky to solve. I know from experience and just looking at the cube that blue and green will always end up opposite each other. You can see it on a solved cube. Green and blue never end up next to each other. So even though this green edge is not quite solved yet, it's not next to its final center, I can put this blue edge right here, and now this green-white edge and this blue-white edge are solved relative to each other, even though they're not quite under their final center. Now for this last orange one, I can do this, move the cross over, and put it in. Here's another example of solving relatively. In this example, white-orange and white-blue are in the bottom layer, but not under their respective centers yet. And we have white-red and white-green over here. If I got this scramble, what I would do is first solve white-red into the bottom because that's opposite this white-orange edge, like this. Now, these 3 cross pieces are solved relative to each other. Then, white-green is one move away from moving into the bottom layer. So I would move the cross instead of the pieces, take this edge and put it right here, because now this green and white edge is solved relative to the blue and white edge over here and these other edges. Now move the cross so that everything matches up. The replacement technique. This is less of a weird technique and more of a specific way of looking at everything we've learned up to this point. In this example, green and orange are solved already, and the blue edge is ready to go in here. The problem is the red and white edge is already in this spot. So what do we do here? Well, we replace this edge with this white-blue one. Now we solve this edge by moving the cross instead of the pieces, putting this in the bottom, and fixing the cross. Let me show this same idea, but a little bit more complicated. In this example, we have orange and blue in the bottom layer, but they're not solved correctly relative to each other. Orange should be on this side of blue. And we can tell that because the orange center is to the left of blue, but the cross, the orange piece, is to the right of blue. So these pieces are not solved correctly relative to each other. We do have this red piece right here and this green piece right here. What I'm going to do first is solve the red-white edge into the bottom. And now red-white and orange are opposite each other. These two edges are solved correctly relative to each other. The next thing I'm going to do is fix this blue edge by using the replacement technique. This white-green edge goes right here. So I'm going to put it into the bottom and replace that white-blue edge. Now, all three of these edges are solved correctly relative to each other. I'm going to move the cross instead of the pieces and do one more relatively solved piece. Put this white-blue edge into the bottom like this. Now, the cross is one move away, and we're done. That was by far the most complex example we've done so far. It involved moving the cross instead of the pieces, solving relatively, and doing a few different replacements. But that right there is what most cross solutions should look like once you know how to do cross well. You plan the entire thing ahead of time, every move affects the next move that you're going to do, and the whole thing flows well from start to finish. Dealing with the worst pieces. Even when you plan your cross really carefully, you're still going to end up at moments where you have a piece stuck in a bad spot. Even the best planning can't always get around that. The two worst things you can have are a flipped piece in the top, where the rest of the cross is solved, or worse, a flipped piece in the bottom, like this, where the rest of the cross is solved. For this case, where there's a flipped edge in the bottom, what I like to do is something like this. Turn the side that it's on, then do a wide U move, put the edge in the bottom, then fix with another wide U move. If you have a flipped edge in the top of the puzzle, the principle here is to always solve it into either the front or the back, never the left or the right. And the reason for that is that if you try to solve it into the left or the right, you will almost certainly have to regrip to do it. And we're going to talk about finger tricks in a second, but ergonomics are really important. Ergonomics just means how your hands move. So it's really important that if you have a flipped edge in the top, you either solve it into a front position like this, using this, or into the back, doing something like this. Save the easiest pieces for last. To avoid getting ourselves into a situation where we need to use those annoying tricks, a good principle to abide by is to solve the easiest stuff last. So in this example, there's this white and blue piece that looks really easy. It's one move away from being solved. And these other three edges are kind of yucky. I don't want to think about how to do those yet. What most beginners would do is probably solve this first, and now they're stuck with three edges that are not very nice. And they would probably solve white-orange, and then you could do something fun where you solve these relative to each other and use the first turn to set up to the next one. We can be much more efficient though if we wait to solve this white-blue edge. You have way more creative ways to solve bad edges if your cross isn't done yet. Every time you solve a cross piece, your options for solving the remaining edges get less and less. So the easiest edges should be saved till later because they're going to be easy at the start and end of the cross solution. If I got this scramble, what I would do is put orange on top of green like this, and use this green move to set up for the orange edge. Now these two edges are solved relative to each other. I would solve those into the back. Then I would go into the blue piece. Put the red edge on top of the blue piece to use one turn to set up for the next one, and then solve red. That'd be much more ergonomic, and you have an F2L pair built in the back, which is something that is outside the scope of this video, but is called an X-cross, extended cross, building F2L pairs during cross so that it's more efficient for the rest of your solve. Sometimes there are rare exceptions where you shouldn't actually finish your cross. This is jokingly called free fop, where you replace the C in CFOP with free because you're just doing your own thing, you're freestyling. In this example, there are two cross pieces already solved. There's a super easy cross piece right here, and there's a really nasty cross piece over here in the back. There's also an F2L pair right here, ready to go in this slot. If you don't know F2L, don't freak out, stick with me here. If I got this scramble, what I would do is solve this cross edge, then solve this F2L pair. That's 5 moves, and I have 3 cross edges and an F2L pair done. Yes, I have a really annoying edge stuck here in the back of the puzzle, but now, when I go into my next section of the solve, I can kind of fix this naturally by inserting an F2L pair in a creative way, and now this edge is in a much nicer spot. There are rare cases where it makes sense to not finish your cross, take advantage of an easy next step, and then back up and finish the cross. Generally, you don't need to do that. Learn the rules before you break them, but I wanted to put that in here so that you have all the information you need to choose good solutions. Choosing good finger tricks, which is how your hands move to solve the cross, tends to be more of an art than a science, but I'll still give you what principles I can to help you do this well. Choose a good starting move. Something a lot of people don't think about is the way that they move from starting the timer to picking up the puzzle. Your hands always have to start flat on the timer, so the first move you do matters a lot because it's what influences the way you move your hands from the timer to the puzzle. If you're going from this position to the puzzle, the easiest first move is a U or a D move, because those don't require you to lift the cube very far off the table. Those fingers get into contact with the puzzle very quickly, and you can pull these moves off without getting much height off the table. After a U and D move, the next best thing to do would be an R or an L move, because your hands naturally fall into this position as you pick up the cube. So U and D moves first is really good, R and L moves first is kind of okay, but it's a really bad idea to start with an F move or a B move. Because going from this position, turning your wrist and grabbing the cube this way or this way is really awkward, and it requires the most consistent grip before you're able to start doing it. So in general, bias toward a U move, a D move when you start, or an R move, L move. So in this example, we have 2 cross edges that are almost solved, orange and blue. We have this white-green edge that's ready, and this white-red edge that's ready. If I were going to solve this, I would start with a D move like this, because that solves these 2 edges. My remaining options are an F move to solve this, and an R move to solve this. In this scenario, I would then do the R move, and I would probably pick the cube up so that my thumb is on the bottom as my left hand is doing the D move. Then do this with that finger right there. That goes into the next idea. Use each turn to position your hands for the next one. In this example, we have the white-orange and white-blue edges that are solved opposite to their respective centers, the white-green edge right here, and the white-red edge right here. A sensible starting move is an R move to move this to the bottom, but I would like to set this piece up to go down here. The problem is F moves and B moves are really annoying to do because they almost always require a regrip. So what would be smart is starting the solve in this position, putting this piece right here, setting this piece up to go into the bottom, and now my hand is in a position where I can do this F move without having to regrip at all. The starting grip that I chose so that this move would be executable without a regrip. There are lots of ways where you can strategically use an R move or an L move to position an index finger to flick the back, or to position one of your ring fingers to flick the back, pointer fingers to use the front. Look for strategic ways to use those moves to set up your fingers to do the next things that are coming up. Choose creative starting angles. Now that we've talked about which moves are good and bad to start the solve with and using hand position strategically, we can talk about doing weird things to take advantage of those. So if it's best to start with a U move or a D move, but your cross solution obviously needs to start with an F move, what do you do? So in this example, these two cross edges, blue-red, are already solved, and we have two pieces left. The obvious thing is to do FR2. So what's the best way to execute this? It's really not great to start with an F move, but if you were to set the cube down so that this is on the top and treat the first move like a U move, it's way easier to finger trick. Then do a wide L move to move white to the bottom and an R like that. That's way, way more ergonomic. And you can do it in one fluid motion. There are all sorts of examples where using an unconventional start position allows you to choose a more ideal starting move or get your hands in a position for the first move that makes your later moves better. So even if it seems like you have to start with an F move or a B move, look for ways to reposition the start. Use wide moves to turn bad edges into good ones. We talked about bad and good pieces earlier, where sometimes a piece takes more or less moves to solve, but in this context, I'm talking about a bad edge being one that would require a regrip to solve. So in this example, red and orange are solved properly relative to each other, and this white-green edge is ready to be solved right here, relative to red and orange. The white-blue edge is stuck over here in the back. The obvious thing is to start here. How do we deal with this? If we do a D move, it takes a regrip to solve this blue edge back here. What we can do, though, is a wide U prime. Now, this edge is right here, ready to go into the bottom layer, completely regripless. Boom, boom, boom. And then you can finish with a wide U2. There are lots of scenarios like that, where there's a really frustrating edge that is 2 moves away from being solved with a D and then an F or a B move, that instead you could use a wide U move and then be able to solve it with an R or an L. When to choose longer solutions. There's a reason I separated choosing efficient solutions, which is short moves, and good finger tricks, which is turning the cube well. Those things are often at odds with each other. Here's a really simple example. Here's a cross where red and green are not quite solved, but they're solved relative to each other, and then orange and blue are here and here. The most efficient way to do this is to align these with the first move. Second move is to move this over here. Third, solve this. And fourth, solve this edge. The problem is that's a lot of different directions happening at once. We have to move this to the back and turn this down and do a B2 move. It's very efficient, but there's a slightly more ergonomic way of doing it. If I got this scramble, I would take these 2 pieces, move them to the left, insert orange, do a D move, insert this to the bottom, then put this back. That's 1 move longer than the other solution I showed you, but I think it flows better. I'd be able to do it faster in a solve than the one with an extra move. Remember, the goal here is to be fast, not just to be efficient. Almost always, those 2 things are the same. If you're good enough at finding creative finger tricks, you should be able to be near move optimal. But there are many times where adding 1 or 2 moves makes sense to preserve ergonomics, like in this example. Now that you know a lot of theory, here's how to actually put this stuff into practice. I really like this website, speedcubetrainer.com. You can also go to solved.no and it gets you to the same place. Go to the trainers section and then go to inspection trainers and cross. This is what should load after a little bit on that page. This is going to be your new best friend if your goal is to get good at solving cross. You need to learn 2 things, right? You need to learn how to be efficient and choose good moves. Then you need to learn how to use good finger tricks and execute those moves well. If you have to deal with really complicated crosses, you're never going to learn that. This trainer lets you choose, I'm going to only do crosses that take 3 moves. Then it'll generate a scramble that gives you a cross that's really easy. You only solve on white? That's not a problem. Make sure that it's set to white. You only solve on orange? I don't know who that is, but okay. Set it to orange. There you go. So the way I would recommend using this is start on 4 move crosses. So I just did a scramble according to what the website gave me, and it is a 4 move cross. There's one here, here, and the solution here would be move the bottom, up, flick here, and then D2 to solve the whole cross. If you go to the website, you have a few options if you get stuck finding the right solution. You can reveal 1 move at a time by hitting next move or an arrow on your arrow key, and you can do this 1 move at a time. If you get a scramble wrong and you want to come back to it later, you can hit the save button right here, and you'll have a list of all the scrambles that you got wrong, along with the solutions for them all in one spot, which is super, super helpful. The way I would recommend using this is generate for yourself a 4 move cross and try to figure out a solution for it, re-gripless, in 4 moves. If you get it correct, do it again and again and again. Keep drilling this until you can get 25 of them in a row, re-gripless, in the optimal number of moves. Once you do that, bump the scrambles up to 5 move crosses. And then, until you can do 25 of them in a row with your eyes closed, re-gripless, at 5 moves or less, keep drilling. This will probably take you a few days to a few weeks. Once you manage to get 25 optimal 5 move crosses, re-gripless from this trainer with your eyes closed, then go to 6 moves. Scramble the cube, inspect, find a solution that's 6 moves long and re-gripless, close your eyes, do it, see if you got it right. At 6 move crosses, I would give yourself 1 re-grip instead of none, but this is the drill that will help you go from not very good to very, very, very good at solving cross. I did something exactly like this for myself, and over the course of a few weeks, I went from really inconsistent at cross to consistently being able to find and execute an optimal solution for 7 move crosses within 5 seconds every single time. What I actually did for myself is I made a spreadsheet where I log every single piece of training that I do, and I put up a video on this channel every week of my week's worth of training and how I did and what I'm going to do the next week if you're interested in that sort of thing. But you can see, I started out by 15 minutes every day, scrambling a 6 move cross and seeing how many I could find. And then eventually, after a few days, I bumped up to 7 move crosses, and I was still inconsistent. I was not finding optimal solutions for 7 move crosses. And so it took me a few weeks of drilling with easy crosses, then harder and harder to find good solutions each time. But starting easy and then gradually improving as your brain adjusts to finding optimal finger tricks and optimal solutions is the key to doing this well. I'm guessing that even after saying all of this, there are still going to be lots of comments on this video like, "Hi Brandon, I'm 11 years old and just got sub 25. How should I practice? How fast should I be improving at cross? I do my cross in this many moves or this much time. Is that good?" Questions like that aren't really helpful because different people get better at different things at different stages of their journey. What matters is your skill, not your times. So if you want to get better at cross, if you cannot plan a re-gripless, optimal solution every time you pick up a cube in under 5 seconds, you have work to do. And it doesn't matter what your average is. It doesn't matter how old you are. Make a plan for how you're going to drill cross each day, probably using the trainer I gave you, and then do it every single day. Write it down somewhere. Maybe make YouTube videos telling other people about what you're going to do. Maybe tell friends or family and have them keep you accountable to your training plan. But the key, now that you have the information, is making a plan to drill and then sticking with it for probably a couple of months before you're going to get substantially better at this. It's very hard, but it's super worth it once you learn all of it. Another common question that people ask is, what if I can't see all the way to the end of my cross solution in inspection? What if I can only plan half of it? My answer to that would be, your practice drill is still going to be the exact same. Start with easy cross solutions that you can see all of, and then gradually increase the complexity of the cross solutions in the trainer until you can plan the whole thing later. If you remember from the beginning of the video, the nature of solving cross well is that you view the whole thing as one solution, not as individual edges that you're solving one at a time. There is no way to solve cross well and not be able to plan the whole thing from the start. So the nature of the skill is that you have to be able to plan the whole thing. Your ability to see further into inspection will improve with time. Start as simple as you're able to see the whole thing and gradually ratchet up the difficulty from there. If you want motivation or inspiration on how else to practice or somebody to grind with you, I make videos on this channel every week documenting my practice and how I'm training to be a world-class cuber.